I was only 16 during this time. I was browsing on Craigslist looking for an Xbox. My Xbox had been broken recently due to it overheating. I then came across a guy named Mike who was selling an Xbox for $100. I only had 150 and I had been searching on Craigslist all day and had not seen any prices that were cheaper. It was all overpriced, so I began to text Mike asking, "Hey, are you still selling that Xbox?" It took a minute, but Mike then replied with, "Sure, I am. My address is..." Mike then gave me his address. I felt a little creeped out at this point, but I was a dumb kid and wanted an Xbox. So I met up with Mike at his house without telling my parents. As I arrived at Mike's house riding my bike, I could see the man standing at the front door. His neighborhood did not look so bad, so I began to walk up to Mike as he greeted me and I walked into his house. I began to give Mike the money for the Xbox, and Mike was acting strange. He then said, "I'll be back. Do not leave." I felt creeped out from the tone of Mike's voice. He said that in. I just waited for Mike to get back with the Xbox. As I began to hand the money to Mike for his Xbox, I heard some footsteps. And not like animal footsteps, a human, at least a couple it sounded like. I then took the Xbox and began to start walking out the house. As I heard, "Get the kid." I then ran as fast as I could and got onto my bike and began to pedal away. Mike then started to yell at me and said he will hurt me later on. I was creeped out and just booked it out of there and made it to my home safe. I began to tell my parents about what happened, and then my parents called the police. The police then went over to Mike's house to investigate, but to my surprise, Mike was gone. There was nobody home besides an old lady who was confused about this whole situation. The old lady had been living there for years and said nobody has been over there. The old woman has gone to the hospital not too long ago, so I put two and two together and thought maybe Mike and his friends had broken into the old woman's house. As the police began to question the old woman, she then said, "I have cameras if you would like to see who have been in my house." The cops then investigated the cameras and saw that the men who were after me, including Mike, were all wanted kidnappers who have not been found yet. The scary part about life is there are terrible people out there, and they are just waiting for you to come and say hello. I was 19 at the time when I was scrolling through Craigslist looking for a new car. My old car was a Mustang, but I had a lot of problems with it, and I would be spending more money fixing my car up than buying a new one. I still drove my car around to get around if I needed to. It got me to A and B, but I began and saw a guy named Johnny who was selling a blue Honda Civic for really cheap, and there was nothing wrong with what he said in the description about the car. I then texted Johnny and said, "Hey, are you still selling that car by any chance?" Johnny then replied instantly and said, "Yeah, I am. I'm at work. I can meet you at the park after work." I got the information I needed for the park and waited for Johnny to get off work. I was really desperate on finding a new car. I then met Johnny at the park and started to look at the Honda he was selling. But as I began to look more into the car, I could see a head pop out. It was in the back seat, which I asked, "Hey, I think someone's in your back seat." Johnny then said no, I drove alone. I was creeped out at this point and did not know what to do. I then told Johnny that I could find another deal. Johnny looked at me and said, "You're not going nowhere." As the tone of Johnny said that, I got creeped out even more. On top of that, we was at a park, which trees were surrounded, and it was nighttime. I began to run to my car, and I got into my car and began to drive away. I could see a group of men get out the Honda that Johnny was trying to sell me, holding bats. I then looked for a couple more seconds before booking it out of there, speeding all the way to my house, not looking back. You should always be careful and watch your surroundings. I remember going on Craigslist looking for someone to buy the motorcycle I was selling at the time. The motorcycle was a green crotch rocket that I was selling. I would get a lot of messages from people asking if I would take lower than what the bike was worth. I ignored those people and they were trying to be funny and not actually trying to buy the motorcycle I was selling. I would also get weird messages from dudes. I then began to turn off my phone and got off Craigslist until I got a message from a guy named Tom who wanted to buy the motorcycle and was serious about it. At least that's what I thought. Tom asked if he could come look at the motorcycle after work. I said sure and waited for Tom to get there. I said we could meet up at a park and began to give Tom the address to the park. I did not trust anyone at my house, so after a few hours went by, I went to the park and saw Tom. He was with another guy who looked really down bad. I mean, ripped up, clothes, and just creepy looking. Even the vibe I was getting from Tom and his friend was scary. I then told Tom and Tom then asked me some inappropriate questions that I wasn't even going to get into. I then started to feel weird out and I left. Tom kept texting my Craigslist page until I blocked him. A few hours went by and I got another message from a guy named Ethan who looked like the guy who was with Tom. I ignored the message until Ethan said, "The devil is coming," with a lot of weird emojis. I was confused and weirded out at the same time. A few minutes went by and I remember hearing a knock at my door. I lived by myself at that time, so I was confused who would be knocking at my door. I then looked out the peephole and could see Ethan and his friend Tom. I then called the police and the cops said what happened. They then told me that they would be on their way after I told them there was two creepy men at my door and I don't feel comfortable. After I told Tom and his friend to leave and do not come back to my house, the men just looked at me and laughed. I then started to hear a big bang at my door, demanding me to let me in. My feet then began to curl up as I was frightened and scared for my life. I was only a 19-year-old female at the time, who was living on her own. Tom and Ethan then broke into my door and started to grab my arm as I screamed, "No! Stop! What do you want?" As Tom and them tried to put me inside their truck, I could hear the cop sirens. I started to yell loud as I could, trying to get people's attention. As the cops then pulled up toward my driveway, they could see Tom and his friend trying to kidnap me into their trunk. The police then arrived. "Get on the ground, hands behind your head." After that happened to me, I got a roommate and I do not use Craigslist for anything anymore.